Rain lashed against the windows of Ethan Cole's bookstore. Each drop a tiny drummer announcing the arrival of October's first real storm. The ancient radiator in the corner wheezed and clanked, struggling against the chill that had settled into the worn wooden floorboards. Dust particles danced in the amber glow of vintage reading lamps, creating halos around the few patrons who had sought shelter among the stacks. Ethan's fingers traced the embossed spine of a first-edition Poe, the leather cool and slightly cracked beneath his touch. The familiar scent of old paper and binding glue couldn't quite mask the earthy petrichor seeping in through the weathered doorframe. 3 years since opening Cole's rare books, and still the rain found its way inside, leaving dark crescents on the floorboards near the entrance. A bell chimed, delicate, almost hesitant, as the door opened, bringing with it a gust of wind that ruffled the pages of an open manuscript on the counter. Ethan looked up, tucking a strand of graying hair behind his ear. 45 wasn't old, but grief had etched lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before Sarah's passing. "Just a few minutes until closing," he called out, his voice rough from disuse. Most days passed with fewer than a dozen spoken sentences. Liam was at college now, their phone calls brief and increasingly infrequent. The newcomer didn't respond, just nodded and drifted toward the back corner where the mythology section lived in perpetual shadow. Something about her movement caught Ethan's attention, a peculiar grace, as though she barely touched the ground. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, contrasting with skin so pale it seemed to capture and reflect the amber lamplight. Ethan's chest tightened inexplicably. He rubbed at the spot above his heart, a habit formed in the months after the funeral when panic attacks would strike without warning. The sensation wasn't panic now, but something equally unsettling. Recognition without memory, like a forgotten dream suddenly half-remembered. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second punctuated by the drumming rain. Outside, the streetlights flickered, casting momentary shadows that stretched and receded across the shelves. The woman in the back corner remained motionless, her slender fingers hovering over the spine of a leather-bound volume on ancient folklore. "We're closing in 5, Ethan said, louder this time, his voice bouncing off the bookshelves. Only 2 other customers remained. An elderly man dozing in the reading nook, a half-finished cup of tea gone cold beside him, and a college student frantically taking notes from a medical text, her pencil scratching urgently against paper. The woman in the mythology section turned slightly. The movement caught the light, revealing eyes of such unusual clarity that Ethan found himself stepping back. Not quite blue, not quite gray. Something in between that seemed to shift with the flickering lights. "I've been looking for this for a very long time," she said, her voice carrying a subtle accent Ethan couldn't place. Something old world, with consonants that seemed to linger in the air. She held up a worn tome with faded gold lettering. The Carpathian Histories. Ethan's brow furrowed. He didn't remember ordering that book. The mythology section was Sarah's project. After her death, he'd let it languish, unable to bear cataloging the books she'd loved. "That's not in our inventory," he said, moving closer. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight, marking his approach. The woman's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "No, I don't imagine it would be. Some books find their way to where they're needed." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine, raising gooseflesh along his arms. The radiator chose that moment to clank loudly and fall silent, as though something had switched it off. The temperature in the shop seemed to drop several degrees in an instant. "I'm Madison," she said, extending a hand that looked as though it had never seen sunlight. "Madison Reyes." Ethan hesitated before taking her hand. Her skin was cool, not cold, but lacking the warmth he expected, like touching marble that had been in shade rather than sun. "Ethan Cole," he replied, withdrawing his hand perhaps too quickly. "I'm the owner." "I know." Madison's gaze drifted to the photograph behind the counter. Ethan, Sarah, and a teenage Liam, all smiling on a beach somewhere. "You've created something special here. A sanctuary of sorts." The elderly man in the reading nook stirred, checked his watch, and gathered his things with the unhurried movements of someone for whom time had become a luxury rather than a constraint. The medical student closed her book with a sigh, the sound of pages coming together like the soft beating of wings. "We're closing," Ethan repeated, more to himself than to Madison. The storm outside had intensified, rain now hammering against the windows with percussive insistence. Lightning flashed, illuminating Madison's face in stark relief, cheekbones sharp as blades, eyes suddenly reflective like a cat's. "Of course," she said, placing the book back on the shelf with reverent care. "Perhaps another time." As the other customers made their way to the door, pulling up collars and opening umbrellas, Madison lingered, her gaze traveling over the shelves as though memorizing their contents. Ethan found himself reluctant to usher her out into the storm, though he couldn't explain why. "Do you have far to go?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. He rarely engaged with customers beyond the necessary pleasantries of commerce. Madison turned those unsettling eyes toward him. "The bus stop on Maple. I'm staying at the Harborview Inn for a few days." Ethan glanced at his watch, then out at the tempest that had transformed the street into a shallow river. "The last bus runs in 20 minutes. This weather." He trailed off, calculating the distance to Maple Street. It was at least a 10-minute walk in good conditions. "I don't mind the rain," Madison said, though her light dress and thin cardigan suggested otherwise. She had no umbrella, no raincoat, nothing to protect her from the deluge outside. Ethan's hand moved unconsciously to his left side, where the phantom pain of loss sometimes manifested as a physical ache. Sarah would have insisted on driving this strange woman to her destination. Sarah, who never met a stray cat or lost tourist she wouldn't help. "I could give you a ride," he offered, the words escaping before he could reconsider. "Or at least walk you to the bus stop. I have an umbrella large enough for two." Something flickered across Madison's face. Surprise, perhaps, or wariness. "That's very kind, but unnecessary. I've weathered worse storms than this." She moved toward the door, her movements liquid and precise. Ethan followed, keys jangling in his hand. The thought of this woman walking alone in the storm triggered an unexpected protective instinct, dormant since Liam left for college. As he locked the register and switched off the main lights, leaving only the security lamp glowing, he felt a strange urgency building in his chest. "At least take this," he said, reaching behind the counter for the folded emergency poncho he kept for unexpected downpours. His fingers brushed past it, finding instead the soft leather of his jacket, the one Sarah had given him on their last anniversary. He hesitated, then pulled it out. Madison was already at the door, her hand on the brass handle. Lightning flashed again, closer this time, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that rattled the windows. In that electric moment, Ethan could have sworn her eyes reflected the light like polished silver. Really, I'll be fine, she insisted, though a slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. The rain doesn't bother me. Ethan moved to the door, jacket in hand. Humor me, he said, surprised by the firmness in his voice. My son would never forgive me if I let someone walk out into this without proper protection. Madison's expression softened at the mention of Liam. You have a son? At Georgetown, pre-med. Pride and loneliness tangled in Ethan's chest. He calls when he remembers. Outside, the wind howled through the narrow street, bending the young maples that lined the sidewalk. A trash can toppled over, its contents tumbling and spinning down the flooded gutter. The storm had emptied the usually busy evening streets. Not a soul was visible through the curtain of rain. Ethan's hand moved to the light switch, hesitating. Closing meant returning to his empty apartment above the shop, to leftover pasta and the low murmur of a television turned on for company rather than entertainment. The thought of walking through the storm, even briefly, with this enigmatic woman offered a strange respite from his routine solitude. I insist, he said, holding out the jacket. It's waterproof and has a hood. I'll walk you to the bus stop. Madison studied him, her head tilting slightly as though listening to something beyond human hearing. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the percussion of rain and the distant wail of a car alarm triggered by the storm. Why would you do that for a stranger? She finally asked, her voice barely audible above the weather's fury. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Why indeed? The question penetrated deeper than it should have, touching something raw and unexamined. The jacket felt heavy in his hands, weighted with memory and meaning. Sarah's last gift to him, unworn since her funeral. Because it's the right thing to do, he answered simply, though the words felt inadequate. And because sometimes strangers are just friends we haven't met yet. He winced inwardly at the cliché, but Madison's expression softened further. An old soul, she murmured, so quietly he almost missed it. They're becoming rare. She reached for the jacket, her fingers brushing his, that same cool touch. But this time Ethan noticed something else, a slight tremor, as though maintaining her composure required effort. Up close, he could see fine droplets of water clinging to her hair and eyelashes from her brief exposure when she'd entered the shop. They caught the light like tiny diamonds. Ethan helped her into the jacket, the leather creaking softly as it settled on her shoulders. It was too large for her slender frame, the sleeves extending past her fingertips, but she drew it close around herself, as though absorbing more than just its physical protection. Thank you, she said, and the simple phrase carried unexpected weight. Kindness without agenda is uncommon in my experience. Ethan retrieved his umbrella from the stand by the door, an oversized black canopy with a wooden handle worn smooth by years of use. Ready? He asked, his hand on the deadbolt. Madison nodded, pulling up the jacket's hood. The leather framed her face, highlighting the sharp angles of her cheekbones and the unusual pallor of her skin. For a moment, she looked like something from another time. A figure stepped out of one of the ancient paintings that occasionally passed through his shop. The bell chimed as Ethan opened the door, the sound immediately swallowed by the storm's roar. Wind-driven rain slashed sideways, soaking his pants legs even as he struggled to open the umbrella. The canvas snapped taut, immediately straining against the gale. Ethan stepped out, holding the door for Madison. She hesitated at the threshold, one foot on the sidewalk, one still inside the shop. Lightning split the sky again, illuminating her face in stark relief. In that fractional moment, Ethan saw something impossible, her eyes reflecting the light not just with unusual clarity, but with a predatory glow that no human eyes should possess. His heart stuttered, a primitive warning system triggering in his brain. Every instinct suddenly screamed danger, yet his feet remained rooted to the spot, the umbrella shuddering in his grip. Madison stepped fully outside, the door swinging shut behind her with a final chime. The security system engaged with a soft beep, locking them out in the tempest. She moved closer to him, sheltering under the umbrella, close enough that he could smell an unfamiliar scent. Not perfume, but something older, like petals pressed between the pages of a forgotten book. "The bus stop is this way," Ethan said, his voice nearly lost in the storm. He gestured down the flooded street, where the dim outline of the covered stop was just visible through the rain. They walked in silence, huddled together beneath the straining umbrella. Water sloshed around their ankles, soaking through Ethan's shoes. Madison moved with surprising sureness, as though the darkness presented no obstacle to her vision. When their shoulders brushed, Ethan felt that same inexplicable recognition, a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. At the bus stop, they found the shelter partially collapsed, one glass panel shattered by the force of the wind. The schedule board hung askew, its plastic cover cracked. No protection from the elements remained. "How long until the bus comes?" Madison asked, her voice carrying clearly despite the storm's cacophony. Ethan checked his watch, squinting through rain-spattered glasses. 10 minutes, if it's running at all in this weather." Another flash of lightning, this one striking close enough that the thunder followed instantaneously, a physical force that Ethan felt in his chest. The umbrella inverted with a sickening snap, ribs breaking as the wind claimed it. Rain immediately drenched them both, plastering Ethan's shirt to his skin. Madison's hand found his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Perhaps we should—" The words died as headlights appeared through the curtain of rain, approaching fast, too fast for the flooded street. The vehicle hydroplaned, tires losing contact with the submerged asphalt. It spun toward them, a metal leviathan out of control. Time slowed. Ethan felt himself being shoved backward with impossible force. He stumbled, fell, the breath knocked from his lungs as he hit the sidewalk. Through the curtain of rain, he saw Madison standing where he had been, facing the oncoming vehicle, her posture not one of fear, but of readiness. The jacket flared around her like wings as she raised one pale hand toward the spinning car. And in that suspended moment, Ethan saw her eyes change completely, pupils elongating, irises bleeding to crimson. Her lips parted, revealing teeth that no human mouth should contain. "What are you?" he gasped, but his words were lost beneath the screech of brakes and the roar of the storm. The car slid sideways, metal groaning as it slammed into a light pole with a deafening crash. Metal crumpled, glass shattered. The pole swayed dangerously, its light flickering before going dark. Madison stood motionless in the downpour, her outstretched hand slowly lowering as the car settled into its new, mangled shape. Steam hissed from the crushed hood, mingling with the rain. For a heartbeat, she remained transformed, those impossible eyes, those teeth, before her features shifted back to human appearance with unsettling fluidity. Ethan couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Rain streamed down his face as he stared at her from the sidewalk, his mind refusing to process what he'd witnessed. The driver's door of the wrecked vehicle creaked open, and a dazed man stumbled out, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Are you all right?" Madison called to him, her voice betraying none of the otherworldliness Ethan had just glimpsed. The driver nodded shakily, leaning against his ruined car. I don't know what happened. The brakes, the water. Madison turned to Ethan, extending her hand to help him up. Raindrops clung to her eyelashes like tears. We should get you home, she said softly. Ethan stared at her offered hand, heart hammering against his ribs. What are you? He repeated, louder this time. Her expression remained carefully neutral, but something ancient flickered behind her eyes. This isn't the place for that conversation. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the storm's cacophony. Madison's gaze darted toward the sound, a flash of what might have been concern crossing her features. Please, she said, her voice barely audible above the rain. Trust me just a little longer. Against every rational instinct, Ethan took her hand. Her skin was cool despite the summer heat, her grip gentle yet impossibly strong as she helped him to his feet. Water streamed from his clothes, his shoes squelching as he stood. My apartment's 3 blocks from here, he said, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. We can dry off there. They walked in silence through the deluge, the storm's fury beginning to abate as they reached Ethan's building. The lobby lights flickered as they entered, the power struggling against the weather's assault. Ethan's shoes squeaked against the tile floor, leaving puddles in their wake. The elevator ride to the 4th floor stretched into an eternity of dripping clothes and unasked questions. His hands trembled slightly as he unlocked the door, hyper-aware of Madison's presence behind him. The apartment was dark, save for the digital clock on the microwave, its green numbers casting an eerie glow across the kitchen counter. Power's out, Ethan muttered, fumbling in a drawer for matches. He lit 3 candles on the coffee table, their warm glow pushing back the darkness. Shadows danced across Madison's face as she stood in the center of his living room, water pooling at her feet. I'll get towels, he said, desperate for a moment alone to collect his thoughts. In the bathroom, Ethan braced himself against the sink, staring at his reflection in the dim emergency light. Water dripped from his hair, running down his face like tears. His glasses were spotted with raindrops, distorting his vision. He removed them, cleaning them mechanically on a hand towel while his mind raced. What had he seen? Those eyes, those teeth, impossible things that couldn't exist outside of horror films. Yet Madison had saved him, pushing him out of harm's way with inhuman strength. She could have let him die. Instead, she'd revealed herself. Ethan grabbed 2 large bath towels from the linen closet and returned to the living room. Madison stood exactly where he'd left her, examining a framed photograph on the bookshelf. Ethan and Liam at the beach last summer, their last vacation before Rachel's diagnosis. Here, he said, offering her a towel. She accepted it with a nod of thanks, her fingertips brushing his. A jolt of something, not quite electricity, something older and stranger, passed between them at the contact. Your son? She asked, gesturing to the photograph. Liam. He's staying with my sister tonight. Ethan toweled his hair roughly, buying time. He's 8. Madison dabbed at her face, her movements graceful despite her sodden state. He has your eyes. Everyone says he looks like his mother. The words emerged more sharply than Ethan intended. I didn't say he looked like you, Madison replied softly. Just that he has your eyes, the same curiosity, the same kindness. Ethan swallowed hard. I think you owe me an explanation. Madison's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. She draped the towel around her neck, her gaze meeting his directly. Yes, I suppose I do. She glanced at the couch. May I? Ethan nodded, and she perched on the edge of the cushion, her posture unnaturally perfect. He remained standing, unwilling to surrender the slight advantage of height. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, she began, her voice low and measured. I've existed for a very long time, Ethan. Longer than this city. Longer than this country. What are you? He asked for the third time that night, his voice barely above a whisper. I think you already know. Her eyes held his, unflinching. Your stories get some things right, many things wrong. The word hung unspoken between them, too absurd to voice aloud. Yet Ethan had seen her eyes change, had seen teeth no human should possess. He'd felt her impossible strength. Vampire, he finally said, the word falling from his lips like a stone into still water. Madison neither confirmed nor denied it immediately. Instead, she looked down at her hands, elegant fingers interlaced in her lap. That word has become corrupted, sensationalized. But yes, in essence. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in stark white for a split second. Thunder followed several seconds. Later, the storm moving away. I don't drink from humans, she added quickly. Not anymore. Not for centuries. Centuries, Ethan echoed, the word hollow in his mouth. He sank into the armchair across from her, legs suddenly unable to support him. How old are you? A sad smile touched her lips. I was born in what you would call 1387 in northern Spain. I was turned in 1412. Ethan's mind reeled with the implications. Over 600 years of existence. Events he'd studied in history books, she'd lived through. That's difficult to comprehend, I know. Madison leaned forward slightly. I don't expect you to believe me immediately. But after what you saw tonight, the car, Ethan said, remembering how she'd faced it without fear. You stopped it somehow. I redirected its momentum. Physics still applies to me, just differently. She hesitated. I shouldn't have revealed myself that way. It was reckless, but I couldn't let you be hurt. Why? The question escaped before Ethan could stop it. Why would you care what happens to me? Madison's expression softened, vulnerability flashing across her features. Because in 6 centuries, I've learned that human lives are precious precisely because they're finite. And yours. She trailed off, looking away. Yours seems particularly worth preserving. Heat crept up Ethan's neck despite the chill of his wet clothes. He stood abruptly. I should change. You're welcome to. I might have something you could borrow. Until your clothes dry. Madison nodded, a hint of amusement in her eyes at his sudden awkwardness. Thank you. In his bedroom, Ethan peeled off his soaked shirt, his mind still struggling to process the night's revelations. He found a pair of sweatpants and a faded university t-shirt for himself, then located a larger t-shirt and drawstring pajama pants that might fit Madison. He changed quickly, hanging his wet clothes over the shower rod. When he returned to the living room, Madison was examining his bookshelf again, running her fingers along the spines of his collection of historical fiction and mythology texts. You have an interest in the past, she observed without turning. I teach history at the community college, Ethan replied, offering the dry clothes. Medieval and Renaissance periods, actually. A genuine smile curved her lips. How fitting. The bathroom's down the hall if you want to change. Madison accepted the clothes with a nod of thanks and disappeared into the bathroom. Ethan used her absence to light more candles, placing them strategically around the room. The storm continued to rumble outside, but with less intensity now, the rain a gentle patter against the windows. When Madison returned, Ethan nearly dropped the match he was holding. His clothes hung loosely on her frame, making her appear younger, more vulnerable somehow. She'd removed her makeup, and her damp hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without her usual polished appearance, she looked almost human. "Better?" she asked, misinterpreting his stare. "Yes, are you comfortable? Would you like some tea? I have a gas stove, so the power outage isn't an issue." "Tea would be lovely, thank you." Ethan busied himself in the kitchen, grateful for the mundane task to occupy his hands. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on him. Making tea for a centuries-old vampire while a summer storm raged outside. His life had become the opening of a supernatural novel. "Do you take sugar?" he called, then immediately felt foolish. "Can you even... 2 sugars, please," Madison replied, amusement coloring her voice. "And yes, I can consume normal food and drink. It simply doesn't sustain me." Ethan returned with 2 steaming mugs, handing one to Madison before reclaiming his seat across from her. "So what does? Sustain you, She cradled the mug in her palms, inhaling the steam. "Blood, yes, but not as your fiction portrays it. I don't need to drain someone dry every night. A few ounces every week or so is sufficient. And as I said, I haven't taken from humans in a very long time." "Animal blood?" Ethan ventured. Madison nodded. "Among other sources, medical supply, blood banks, there are ethical ways in this modern world." Ethan sipped his tea, buying time to organize his thoughts. "You said not anymore. That you don't drink from humans anymore, which means you used to." Her expression darkened, something ancient and sorrowful passing behind her eyes. "I've lived through dark times, Ethan. I've been both predator and prey. I've committed acts I can never atone for, and I've suffered punishments you cannot imagine." She set her mug down carefully. "But that's not why I'm here in Oakwood." "Why are you here then?" "Exile," she said simply. "And protection." "Protection from what?" Madison's gaze drifted to the window, where lightning occasionally illuminated the night sky. "From whom, you mean? There are others like me. Older, more powerful, and far less concerned with human life." A chill ran down Ethan's spine that had nothing to do with his damp hair. "And they're looking for you?" "One in particular, William. He was once my mentor then." She hesitated, pain flashing across her features. Something more. Until he wasn't. Ethan recognized the expression. He'd seen it in his own mirror after Rachel's death, the hollow look of profound loss. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Madison's eyes snapped back to his, surprise evident in her expression. "You're apologizing? To me? After what I've revealed to you?" "Pain is pain," Ethan said simply, "no matter how old you are." Something shifted in Madison's demeanor then, a softening around her eyes, a slight relaxing of her shoulders. "You're a remarkable man, Ethan Cole." Before he could respond, a loud crack of thunder shook the building, and the power surged, back on. Lamps blazed to life, the television in the corner humming as it rebooted. The sudden brightness made them both blink. "I should go," Madison said, rising. "Dawn isn't far off, and I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." "Your clothes are still wet," Ethan protested, standing as well. "And the storm hasn't completely passed." "I'll be fine." She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. We're more durable than your stories suggest. Sunlight won't reduce me to ash, though I do burn rather easily. At least let me call you a cab. Madison shook her head. Thank you, but no. I prefer to make my own way. She hesitated, then added, I understand if you wish to distance yourself from me after tonight. What I am, what I've revealed, it's a burden I shouldn't have placed on you. Ethan considered her words carefully. Logic dictated that he should indeed distance himself, that he should be terrified of what she represented. Yet something deeper, something inexplicable, pulled him toward her. I'd like to see you again, he said, surprising himself with his certainty. If you're willing. Madison studied his face, as if searching for signs of deception or fear. Finding none, she nodded slowly. I'd like that too. She moved toward the door, then paused. Your son, Liam, does he like art? The question caught Ethan off guard. He does, actually. He's quite talented for his age. Why? I'm hosting a children's art workshop at the gallery next Saturday. Perhaps he'd enjoy it. She smiled again, softer this time. You'd both be welcome. I'll ask him, Ethan promised. He's been looking for new activities since... He trailed off, the familiar ache of Rachel's absence tightening his chest. Since his mother passed, Madison finished gently. I understand loss, Ethan, more than you might imagine. She slipped out of his borrowed clothes in the bathroom, emerging in her own still damp attire. At the door, she turned back to him one last time. Thank you for the tea. And for listening? And for not running away, screaming? Ethan laughed softly. The night's still young. Madison's answering smile contained a hint of her true age, wisdom and sorrow intertwined. Good night, Ethan Cole. Good night, Madison. After she left, Ethan stood in his doorway for a long moment, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. The impossible had entered his life tonight. He should be terrified, should be calling someone, though who would believe him? Yet instead he felt strangely at peace, as if some cosmic tumblers had clicked into place. He slept deeply that night, dreamless for the first time since Rachel's death. The gallery was busier than Ethan had expected for a Saturday morning. Parents and children filled the open space, voices echoing off the high ceilings. Colorful paintings lined the walls, interspersed with sculptures and mixed media pieces. At the center of it all stood Madison, helping a young girl with pigtails mix colors on a palette. Dad, look. Liam tugged at Ethan's sleeve, pointing to a massive abstract canvas dominating one wall. It looks like a storm. Ethan studied the painting, swirls of midnight blue and violet, shot through with jagged lines of silver and gold. It did indeed resemble the storm from a week ago, though more beautiful, more controlled in its chaos. It's called Tempest, a familiar voice said beside him. Madison had appeared silently, her smile warm as she looked down at Liam. Do you like it? Liam nodded enthusiastically. Did you paint it? I did, Madison confirmed, during a particularly memorable thunderstorm. Her eyes met Ethan's briefly, a shared secret passing between them. I'm Liam, his son announced, extending his hand with the solemn formality of a child trying to act grown up. Madison knelt to his level, accepting the handshake with equal seriousness. I'm Madison Reyes. I'm very pleased to meet you, Liam. Your father tells me you're quite the artist. Liam shrugged, suddenly shy. I guess. I like drawing monsters mostly. Something flickered in Madison's expression. So brief, Ethan almost missed it. Monsters can be fascinating subjects, she said carefully. Perhaps you'd like to join our workshop? We're creating creatures from mythology today. Liam's eyes lit up. Can I, Dad? Of course. Ethan smiled. I'll be right over there if you need me. He gestured to a seating area where other parents waited, some engrossed in phones, others chatting in small groups. Madison led Liam to a table where several children were already working, introducing him to the group. Ethan watched as his son settled in, immediately reaching for colored pencils and paper. It had been months since he'd seen Liam this animated, this eager to participate in something. He has talent, a voice observed. Ethan turned to find a young woman with cropped dark hair standing beside him. I'm Savannah, she offered, Madison's assistant. Ethan Cole, he replied, shaking her hand. And thank you. He's been through a lot this past year. Savannah's expression softened with understanding. Madison mentioned, I'm sorry for your loss. Ethan nodded his thanks, turning his attention back to the workshop. Madison moved among the children with natural ease, offering guidance here, praise there. No one would guess she was anything other than a talented artist with a gift for teaching. Yet Ethan now saw the careful control in her movements, the deliberate way she moderated her strength when helping a child hold a brush or mold clay. She's good with them, he commented. She's had practice, Savannah replied, something cryptic in her tone. Before Ethan could question her further, she excused herself to help a parent with inquiries about classes. The workshop continued for nearly 2 hours, the children creating increasingly elaborate mythological beings. Ethan alternated between watching Liam work and observing Madison. Occasionally, their eyes would meet across the room, and she would offer a small smile before returning her attention to her students. As the session wound down, parents began collecting their children and their artwork. Liam remained focused on his drawing, tongue caught between his teeth in concentration, a habit he'd inherited from Rachel. May I see? Ethan asked, approaching his son's table. Liam hesitated, then pushed the paper toward him. It's not finished. Ethan studied the drawing. A female figure with flowing dark hair, her eyes 2 different colors. She stood with arms outstretched, surrounded by swirling patterns that resembled both wings and flowing water. Around her neck hung a pendant similar to the one Madison wore. It's beautiful, Ethan said honestly. Is she a specific creature from mythology? Liam shrugged. Ms. Reyes said we could make up our own if we wanted. I call her a guardian. She protects people from bad things. Madison appeared beside them, her expression carefully neutral as she looked at the drawing. That's quite remarkable, Liam. You've captured something very special there. Liam beamed at the praise. Can I come to another class sometime? Of course, Madison replied. We have workshops every Saturday morning. You're welcome anytime. As the gallery emptied, Savannah approached with a tablet. Madison, you have that call with the Munich collector in 20 minutes. Madison nodded. Thank you, Savannah. She turned to Ethan and Liam. I'm afraid I have business to attend to, but I've enjoyed having you both here today. We should let you get back to work. Ethan agreed. Thank you for this. It's the most engaged I've seen him in months. Madison smiled, her eyes softening as she looked at Liam, who was carefully packing up his supplies. Creative expression can be healing, she said quietly. A way to process what we cannot otherwise understand. Something in her tone made Ethan wonder just how much healing she'd needed to do over her centuries of existence. Liam, why don't you wait by the door for a moment? I need to ask Ms. Reyes something about adult art classes. His son nodded, clutching his drawing as he moved toward the entrance. When Liam was out of earshot, Ethan turned to Madison. I'd like to talk more about everything you told me. Madison studied him, her expression unreadable. Are you certain that's wise? Probably not, Ethan admitted. But I have questions, and something tells me you might have answers I've been looking for, even before I knew you existed. She considered this, then nodded slowly. My home. Tomorrow evening, if you can arrange care for Liam. 8 o'clock. She wrote an address on the back of a gallery card and pressed it into his hand. Her fingers lingered against his for a moment longer than necessary. Until then, Ethan Cole. Madison's home was not what Ethan had expected. No Gothic mansion, no ancient castle transported stone by stone. Instead, he found himself outside a renovated industrial loft in the city's arts district, its brick exterior softened by window boxes filled with night-blooming jasmine and moonflowers. He hesitated before pressing the intercom button, suddenly aware of the absurdity of his situation. He was voluntarily visiting a vampire, a being he'd believed fictional until a week ago. Either he was losing his mind, or the world was far stranger than he'd ever imagined. It's open, Madison's voice came through the speaker, startling him from his thoughts. The elevator carried him to the top floor, opening directly into a spacious loft. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights. The space was open, minimally but elegantly furnished with pieces that spanned different eras. An antique writing desk beside a modern leather sofa, a medieval tapestry hanging above a sleek digital sound system. Madison stood by one of the windows, silhouetted against the night sky. She wore a simple black dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She turned as he entered, and Ethan was struck again by her otherworldly beauty. Not just physical perfection, but the depth in her eyes that hinted at centuries of experience. You came, she said, a note of surprise in her voice. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might reconsider, return to the safety of disbelief. She gestured to a sitting area. Please, make yourself comfortable. Would you like wine? Ethan nodded, taking a seat on the leather sofa. This isn't what I expected, he admitted, glancing around the loft. Madison smiled as she poured 2 glasses of deep red wine. No coffins? No cobwebs? She handed him a glass, then settled into an armchair across from him. Fiction has much to answer for. So coffins aren't necessary? I sleep in a bed like anyone else, though I do own several properties with more traditional accommodations for emergencies. Ethan sipped his wine. Rich, complex, undoubtedly expensive. How many of you are there? Vampires, I mean. Madison considered the question. Fewer than there once were. Perhaps 1,000 worldwide. We're not a species that reproduces easily. And you're what? Their queen? Ethan recalled her words from the night of the storm. Exile and protection. Pain flashed across her features. I was, for nearly 2 centuries, until William's betrayal. What happened? Madison rose, moving to the window again. The city sprawled below them, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Power corrupts, Ethan, even, perhaps especially, immortal power. She traced a pattern on the glass with one elegant finger. William was my maker, my mentor, eventually my consort. He taught me to survive, to embrace what I had become. She fell silent for a moment, lost in memories. As the centuries passed, our philosophies diverged. I came to value human life, to see our existence as one of stewardship rather than predation. William did not share this evolution. He believed our superior strength and longevity gave us the right to rule, to feed as we pleased. And the others followed him instead of you, Ethan guessed. Madison turned back to him, surprise evident in her expression. You understand quickly. Yes, there was a schism, a war of sorts. Those loyal to me against those who followed William. Her voice grew softer. Many died, on both sides. In the end, William's faction prevailed. I was given a choice, execution or exile. So you came here, to Oakwood. Eventually, I wandered for decades first. Europe, Asia, South America, searching for purpose after losing everything I'd built. She returned to her seat, her movements fluid, yet somehow weary. I came to Oakwood 5 years ago. It felt right somehow, a place I could build something new. The gallery, Ethan said. Madison nodded. Art has always been my sanctuary, the one constant through the centuries. And William? Is he still looking for you? Something dark passed behind her eyes. Always. He considers my continued existence an affront to his authority, a reminder of his betrayal. Is that why you revealed yourself to me? Because you're in danger? No, Madison said firmly. That was unplanned. I've maintained my cover carefully for years. But when I saw that car spinning toward you, she trailed off, looking away. I couldn't let you die. Why? Ethan pressed, echoing his question from that night. Why risk exposure for a man you barely know? Madison's gaze returned to his, something vulnerable and ancient in her eyes. Because in 600 years of existence, I've learned to recognize kindred spirits, souls that echo my own, however briefly they pass through this world. She set her wineglass down carefully. Your grief called to mine, Ethan. From the moment I saw you in the gallery with Jordan, I recognized something in you, a capacity for depth of feeling that few possess. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibilities. Ethan found himself leaning forward, drawn to her by something beyond physical attraction, a recognition, as she'd said, of something shared. Show me, he said quietly. Madison went still. Show you what? Your true self. No pretense. I want to see you as you really are. Hesitation crossed her features. Many have fled at the sight. I'm not many, Ethan replied simply. Madison held his gaze for a long moment, then closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they had transformed, pupils elongated, irises shifting to that impossible crimson he'd glimpsed during the storm. Her skin seemed to glow from within, taking on an alabaster quality that was beautiful and terrifying at once. When she spoke, he glimpsed the delicate points of extended canines. This is what I am, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics, like multiple voices layered together. What I have been for 6 centuries. Ethan's heart raced, primal fear warring with fascination. He set his wineglass down with a hand that trembled slightly, then did what neither of them expected. He moved to sit beside her, close enough that their knees nearly touched. Thank you, he said softly, for trusting me with this. Madison's transformed eyes widened in surprise. Slowly, her features shifted back to their human appearance, the change rippling across her face like water. You're not afraid. I am, Ethan admitted, but not of you, of what this means, of how it changes everything I thought I knew about the world. And yet you're still here. I'm still here. The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Madison's hand moved to cover his where it rested on the sofa between them. Her touch was cool but not cold, her skin smooth as polished marble. "I should warn you," she said quietly. "Proximity to my kind can be dangerous, not just because of what we are, but because of those who hunt us. William has agents everywhere. If he discovers my attachment to a human—" "Is that what this is?" Ethan asked. "An attachment?" A sad smile touched her lips. "I've tried to deny it, for your safety as much as my sanity. Caring for mortals has only brought me grief through the centuries, and yet," Ethan echoed, turning his hand beneath hers so their palms met, fingers intertwining. The sound of shattering glass broke the moment. Madison was on her feet in an instant, moving with inhuman speed to the window. A brick lay among the glass shards on her floor, wrapped in paper secured with a black ribbon. "Stay back," she warned, her voice tight with sudden tension. She approached the brick cautiously, kneeling to untie the ribbon with careful movements. "What is it?" Ethan asked, rising despite her warning. Madison unfolded the paper, her expression hardening as she read its contents. "A message," she said, her voice cold with fury. "From William." "What does it say?" She looked up at him, fear and rage warring in her eyes. "It says he knows about you, about Liam, and that I have 3 days to surrender myself, or he'll take from me what I value most, just as I once took from him." The paper trembled in her hand as she extended it toward Ethan. Written in what appeared to be blood were the words, "A son for a son, my queen. Come home." Ethan stared at the blood-scrawled message, his heart pounding against his ribs. A son for a son. The words burned into his vision, their meaning unmistakable. William wasn't threatening Madison. He was threatening Liam. "No," Ethan said, his voice barely audible, then louder, "No, this isn't happening." Madison's fingers closed around the paper, crumpling it. "I need to leave. Tonight. If I go to him now, voluntarily, he might spare you both." "And sacrifice yourself?" Ethan stepped forward, gripping her shoulders. "That's your solution?" "It's the only solution that guarantees Liam's safety," she said, her eyes flashing with an ancient resolve that reminded Ethan she had lived through wars, plagues, revolutions, centuries of hard choices. "We'll protect Liam together," Ethan insisted. "We'll get him somewhere safe, and then we'll deal with William." Madison pulled away, moving to the window. The night outside seemed alive with shadows. "You don't understand what William is capable of. He's had centuries to perfect his cruelty." Her voice dropped. "He killed his own son rather than see him follow me. That's the debt he believes I owe." Ethan's mind raced. "Savannah, she can help us, right? And you must have other allies." "Few I would trust with this," Madison admitted. "But yes, Savannah has connections. Safe houses designed to hide our kind, and those under our protection. Then that's where Liam goes. Tonight." Madison turned, studying his face. "And you?" "I'm staying with you." The words left his mouth before he could consider their weight, but once spoken, he knew their truth. "Whatever this is between us, I'm not walking away from it. Not now." Dawn broke over the city as Ethan watched Liam disappear into Savannah's sleek black car. His son had taken the abbreviated explanation that one of Ethan's clients had received threats that might extend to them, with surprising maturity. Perhaps the boy sensed more than Ethan realized. "He'll be safe," Madison said, appearing silently beside him. "Savannah will take him to a compound in the mountains. William won't find him there." "And now?" Ethan asked, feeling oddly calm despite the danger looming over them. Now we prepare. Madison led him back inside, where she unlocked a cabinet Ethan had never noticed before. Inside lay an assortment of weapons that looked both ancient and deadly. Silver daggers, ornate wooden stakes, vials of liquids in various colors. "William will come here first," she explained, selecting a dagger with practiced ease. "He'll want to savor his victory, to see me broken before he takes me back to face the council." The council? The ruling body of our kind. They exiled me centuries ago for choosing to protect humans rather than prey upon them. She handed him a stake, its wood smooth and dark with age. "William was once my closest ally on the council, my mentor, then my betrayer." Ethan weighed the stake in his hand. "How do we kill him?" Madison's eyes met his, something like pride flickering in their depths. "The traditional methods work. Stake through the heart, decapitation. But William is old, powerful. It won't be easy." She hesitated. "Ethan, you can still leave. Join Liam. This isn't your fight." "It became my fight when he threatened my son." Ethan tested the stake's point against his thumb. "Besides, I'm already involved. Have been since that first night at the gallery." Madison's expression softened. "That night, I should never have approached you. I knew better. But something about you called to me." "What was it?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious despite everything. "Your grief," she said simply. It was like looking into a mirror. I recognized it because I've carried my own for centuries. Before Ethan could respond, a sharp crack echoed from the front of the apartment, the sound of splintering wood. "He's here," Madison whispered, her body tensing. "Earlier than I expected." Ethan gripped the stake tighter. "What do we do?" "We fight," she said, moving toward the sound with preternatural grace. "And if we survive, perhaps we'll have time for all the conversations we should have had months ago." The apartment door burst inward, wood fragments exploding across the entryway. In the doorway stood a tall, aristocratic man with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes like polished obsidian. Behind him loomed two larger figures, their movements suggesting the same inhuman strength Madison possessed. "My queen," William said, his cultured voice dripping with mock deference. "How domestic you've become. Playing house with your human pet?" Madison stood her ground, dagger held low at her side. "You've violated the terms of my exile, William. The council won't look kindly on that." William laughed, the sound like ice cracking. "The council sent me, my dear. Your little humanitarian efforts have become too conspicuous, drawing attention to our kind." His gaze shifted to Ethan. "And now this. Entangling yourself with humans. Again." "Leave him out of this," Madison said, her voice deadly calm. "I'm afraid that's impossible now." William stepped fully into the apartment, his followers flanking him. "He's seen too much, knows too much, unless—" A cruel smile curved his lips. "Unless you're planning to turn him. Create another abomination like that boy you tried to save all those centuries ago?" Ethan saw Madison flinch, a flash of ancient pain crossing her features. "That's not your concern," she said. William sighed theatrically. "It is when you leave evidence for humans to find. Your little protege, Jordan, wasn't as careful as you thought. Left quite a trail for hunters to follow." "Jordan?" Madison's composure slipped. "What have you done to him?" "Nothing he didn't deserve for betraying his nature." William's smile widened. "But enough pleasantries. You know why I'm here." He moved with blinding speed, crossing the room in a blur. Ethan barely had time to raise the stake before William was upon them, knocking Madison aside with casual strength. She crashed into the bookshelf, sending volumes tumbling to the floor. Ethan lunged forward, driving the stake toward William's chest, but one of the vampire's followers intercepted him, gripping his wrist with crushing force. Pain shot up Ethan's arm as the bones ground together. "Brave," William commented, watching Ethan struggle. "Stupid, but brave." Madison was back on her feet, moving with the same impossible speed. Her dagger flashed, slicing across the arm of Ethan's captor. The vampire howled, releasing Ethan as black blood welled from the wound. "Silver," Madison explained, her eyes never leaving William. "Burns like fire." William's amused expression hardened. Enough games. He gestured to his companions. "Restrain her. Kill the human." Chaos erupted. Madison moved like liquid lightning, her dagger leaving silver arcs in the air as she fought both vampires at once. Ethan recovered his dropped stake, backing away as William advanced on him. "She'll watch you die," William said conversationally. "Just as she watched my son die when she refused to turn him. Poetic, don't you think?" Ethan feinted left, then dove right, rolling behind the sofa. His hand closed around one of the vials that had fallen from Madison's cabinet during the initial struggle. The liquid inside glowed faintly amber. "Your son chose his fate," Ethan called, trying to keep William's attention while Madison fought. "Just like I'm choosing mine." William's laugh was cold. "And what fate is that? To die for a woman who will live centuries after your bones have turned to dust?" "If necessary." Ethan stood, vial clutched in his hand. "But I was thinking more along the lines of this." He hurled the vial directly at William's face. The vampire moved to dodge, but not quickly enough. The glass shattered against his shoulder, the liquid splattering across his face and chest. William screamed, a sound so inhuman it raised the hairs on Ethan's arms. Where the liquid touched, William's flesh smoked and bubbled. "Blessed oil," Madison called, momentarily free from her attackers. "Well done." William staggered back, clawing at his face. His companions hesitated, torn between helping their master and continuing their attack. Madison seized the opportunity, driving her silver dagger into the chest of the nearest vampire. He collapsed, body convulsing before going still. The remaining vampire snarled, lunging at Madison with renewed fury. They crashed into the dining table, splintering it beneath their weight. Ethan rushed to help, but William recovered faster than expected, grabbing Ethan from behind and hurling him across the room. He hit the wall hard, his vision blurring from the impact. "I've reconsidered," William hissed. His face partially melted on one side, revealing muscle and bone beneath. "I won't kill you quickly. I'll turn you instead. Force Madison to watch as you become the very thing she's tried to protect you from." He hauled Ethan up by the throat, fangs extending. Ethan struggled, kicking and clawing, but William's strength was overwhelming. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision as William's grip tightened. Suddenly, William jerked backward, his grip loosening. Madison stood behind him, both hands gripping a wooden shard from the broken table, driven deep into William's back. The vampire released Ethan, howling as he tried to reach the stake. "Not through the heart," William gasped, twisting to face Madison. "You've lost your touch, my queen." "I wasn't aiming for your heart," Madison replied coldly. "Just keeping you still." In one fluid motion, she swung the silver dagger, slicing clean through William's neck. His head toppled backward, expression frozen in surprise, before both it and his body dissolved into ash. The remaining vampire stared in shock, then turned to flee. Ethan, still gasping for breath, grabbed the fallen stake and hurled it with all his strength. It caught the vampire between the shoulder blades, causing him to stumble. Madison was on him instantly, dispatching him with the same ruthless efficiency. Silence fell over the devastated apartment. Ethan slumped against the wall, his throat bruised, body aching from being thrown. Madison stood amid the destruction, covered in black vampire blood, her eyes still glowing with battle rage. "Is it over?" Ethan managed to ask. Madison looked down at the piles of ash that had been William and his followers. "For now," she said, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "The council will send others eventually, but they'll be more cautious after losing William." She crossed to Ethan, kneeling beside him. Her fingers gently traced the bruises forming on his neck. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This is why I should never have let you into my life." Ethan caught her hand, holding it against his skin despite the pain. "I'm not." 3 days later, Ethan stood in Madison's gallery, surrounded by the city's elite at her latest exhibition opening. The bruises on his neck were hidden beneath a carefully arranged scarf, his other injuries concealed by his suit. Beside him, Liam fidgeted with his tie. Safely returned from his mountain hideaway once Savannah confirmed the immediate danger had passed. "Remind me why we're here again?" Liam whispered. "I thought you said it might be dangerous." "The danger's past," Ethan assured him, though he knew it was only temporary. "And this is important to Madison." Liam studied his father's face. "You really like her, don't you?" "It's complicated," Ethan admitted. "Dad, I'm 14, not 4. I can handle complicated." Before Ethan could respond, the gallery lights dimmed. Madison appeared at the front of the room, resplendent in a gown the color of midnight. The crowd quieted as she began to speak about her exhibition, a series of portraits spanning what she called the human experience of time. Ethan knew the truth behind her work now. Each portrait captured people she had known throughout her centuries of life, rendered in styles appropriate to their eras, but with a continuity that spoke to her unique perspective. "Time moves differently for each of us," Madison was saying, her gaze finding Ethan in the crowd. "What feels like an eternity to one person might be merely a moment to another. These portraits are my attempt to reconcile those differences, to find the universal thread that connects all human experience across time." The crowd applauded politely, but Ethan heard the deeper meaning in her words. The impossible gulf between her immortality and his human lifespan hung between them, unspoken but ever present. As the guests dispersed to view the exhibition, Madison made her way to Ethan and Liam. "What do you think?" she asked, her question encompassing both the exhibition and something much larger. "It's beautiful," Ethan said. "Honest." Liam nodded. "Yeah, it's pretty cool, especially that one." He pointed to a portrait of a young man from what appeared to be the early 19th century. "He looks kind of sad, but like peaceful too." Madison's expression softened. "Very perceptive. He had just made a difficult choice when I painted him." "What choice?" Liam asked. "Whether to embrace change or cling to what was familiar." Madison's eyes met Ethan's over Liam's head. "It's the choice we all face sooner or later." Liam seemed satisfied with this answer and wandered off to examine the other paintings, leaving Ethan and Madison alone. "We need to talk," Ethan said quietly. "About the future." Madison nodded. "Yes, we do. The council won't stay away forever. William's death will have consequences." "I'm not talking about the council." Ethan took her hand, not caring who might see. I'm talking about us, about what happens next. Ethan. Her voice held centuries of sorrow. You know what I am now. You understand the impossibility. I understand that I've spent 3 years hiding from life after losing Sarah, he interrupted. And then you walked into my gallery and woke something in me I thought was dead. I'm not willing to go back to sleepwalking through existence. What are you saying? I'm saying I choose you. Ethan squeezed her hand. Whatever that means, whatever it costs. Madison's eyes widened. You don't know what you're asking. The price of immortality. I'm not asking for immortality, Ethan clarified. Not yet, anyway. I'm just asking for tomorrow, and the day after, for however long we can have. Around them, the gallery buzzed with conversation and movement, the mundane world continuing unaware of the supernatural currents flowing beneath its surface. Liam had found a group of teenagers, children of other patrons, and was laughing at something one of them said. It won't be easy, Madison warned. There will always be danger, always be those who hunt my kind. Nothing worth having comes without risk, Ethan said, the words feeling right as they left his mouth. Sarah taught me that, and I think it's time I remembered the lesson. Madison studied his face for a long moment, as if memorizing every line, every shadow. Then, with deliberate slowness, she leaned forward and kissed him, not with the careful restraint she had always shown before, but with the full force of her true nature. Ethan felt it like electricity through his veins, a connection that transcended the physical. When they separated, he noticed a hush had fallen over their immediate vicinity. Several nearby patrons were staring, some with shock, others with knowing smiles. Well, Madison said, a hint of her ancient mischief returning to her eyes. I believe we've given them something to gossip about. Let them talk, Ethan replied, suddenly unconcerned with appearances. We have more important things to worry about. Madison's smile faded into seriousness. Are you certain, Ethan? This path, once taken, it's difficult to turn back. Ethan looked over at Liam, considering the implications for his son as well as himself. The boy caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up, his adolescent approval both comical and deeply moving. I've never been more certain of anything, Ethan said, turning back to Madison. Whatever comes, we face it together. As if in response to his declaration, the gallery lights flickered momentarily, a brief acknowledgement from the supernatural world that had become entwined with his own. A few guests looked up in confusion, but most didn't notice, too absorbed in art and conversation. Madison noticed, though. Her eyes tracked the shadows that momentarily lengthened, recognizing the sign for what it was. The veil between worlds thins when powerful choices are made, she murmured. It seems the universe is listening. And what does it say? Ethan asked, only half joking. Madison's smile returned, tinged with something ancient and knowing. It says nothing is truly immortal except change itself. She squeezed his hand. Are you ready for yours? Ethan looked around the gallery, at the patrons admiring Madison's work, at Liam finding his place among his peers, at the portraits of lives long past, yet preserved through Madison's immortal perspective. He thought of Sarah, of the grief that had nearly consumed him, of the unexpected second chance that had appeared in his darkest hour. Yes, he said simply. I'm ready. As they stood together in the gallery, the last rays of sunset filtered through the windows, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own. Ethan felt the weight of Madison's centuries of existence beside him, no longer frightening but comforting. a continuity in a world of constant change. The scent of her perfume mingled with the subtle, ancient aroma that was uniquely hers, imprinting itself on his memory. It was the smell of time itself, he realized. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Ethan Cole found himself looking forward to tomorrow.